Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I'm your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder, and last time I started the Battle of Globe Tavern as Grant attempted to cut more rail lines running into Petersburg. Now I continue the battle as more troops move toward the tavern. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already, join the Patreon page, and purchase something from one of my online stores. Every little bit helps. Thank you. Confederate General Henry Heth pushed back Gouverneur K. Warren's 5th Corps north of the Globe Tavern on August 18th. Warren eventually pushed back Heth's attackers by the end of the day, but Heth caused significant damage. During the night and into August 19th, Warren's command made a few mistakes when they formed their battle line in preparation for more Confederate attacks. He wanted Edward Bragg's brigade of Lysander Cutler's division to extend William Hartshorne's brigade, making up the picket line to the northeast. However, miscommunication led Bragg to extend the picket line to the southeast. The reason Warren wanted his pickets to extend to the northeast was to give him ample warning if a Confederate attack was coming from the right, which would be attacking his weakest flank. Crawford's division's right flank was in the air and susceptible to an attack, but with Bragg misplacing his picket line, Warren's entire battle line became compromised. Ulysses S. Grant and George Meade made efforts to reinforce Warren. The 9th Corps Division of Orlando B. Wilcox made it to Globe Tavern, where Warren placed it as a reserve. More 9th Corps troops were on the way. On the Confederate side, Pierre-Gustave Toutant-Beauregard got word from Henry Heth that at least 3 Union divisions occupied Globe Tavern. Beauregard couldn't send too many troops away on an expedition to rid the Weldon Railroad of Union forces, because that could possibly open up the main Petersburg line to attack by the 18th Corps. Nevertheless, he sent 2 of Robert Hoke's brigades to William Mahone of A.P. Hill's corps to make an attack to drive Warren back. Mahone was a railroad man before the war and had surveyed some of the railroad going into Petersburg. He knew the terrain around Globe Tavern extremely well and proposed a plan to use a ravine to sneak his troops close to the picket line without being detected and hit the enemy in the exposed flank. He knew the terrain wouldn't allow Warren to cover the entire ground requisite to guard the Union right flank, and Mahone was right. The precarious 5th Corps line stretched from just west of the railroad to the 9th Corps near the Jerusalem Plank Road. Between 3:30 and 4 p.m., Mahone's men, using the ravine, approached the Union picket line within 20 yards before the enemy saw them, and charged through the Union soldiers. In one swift movement, Mahone's men broke into the Union rear. When he performed that maneuver, Heth was to attack to keep pressure on the Union front so Mahone could threaten the rear. A member of the 24th Michigan forming that picket line remembered Mahone's attack. Every man then took care of himself, and there was a lively foot race amid shower after shower of bullets, as the men had no desire to visit Georgia and other southern prison pens. A volume might be written on the narrow and often laughable escapes of the men at this time. When Heth heard the heavy firing on his left, he knew Mahone's columns were moving in on the Union flank and rear, so he pushed his men forward, putting heavy pressure on the Union front. Part of Mahone's attackers exposed themselves in the fields outside of the Globe Tavern and came under a heavy artillery fire, which sent them back into the woods to avoid the destruction. The Union front line began to break down quickly as Mahone's men hit them directly in the flank. Union troops panicked from the sudden appearance of Confederates behind them, and they ran for their lives or surrendered. All was now confusion. Without leaders, the men were completely demoralized. In these dark and dismal woods, dismayed by the fire of our own guns, the men made but a short resistance. The enemy, quick to perceive that large captures would be made, rushed upon the troops and, finding them without formation, but with every man looking out for himself, captured them without much difficulty. Chaos reigned north of the Globe Tavern, with Mahone's men capturing huge amounts of Union soldiers. The problem became that the number of prisoners outgrew the amount of men guarding them, and the prisoners would take their captors prisoner. A North Carolinian remembered this was a regular wood scramble, it being impossible to preserve anything like a line of battle on account of the density of the woods. The result was that we captured a large number of prisoners and suffered considerable loss ourselves, some of our men being captured and recaptured several times. To deal with this breakdown of command, Warren dispatched 2 of Charles Griffin's brigades to reinforce Ayres's division west of the railroad. Then he moved Wilcox's brigades from a reserve position to attack Colquitt's men in the woods to the northeast of the tavern. John Hartramp's brigade was in front with William Humphrey right behind. Humphrey maneuvered to the left of Hartranft, expanding the Union front and pushing on toward the ground given up near the railroad. Coming up to support Warren was the 9th Corps Division of Julius White. With Joseph Barnes on the left and Gilbert Robinson on the right, the Union division moved forward to help their fellow 9th Corps soldiers. As Union reinforcements got to the field, Mahone was searching for more troops to land the death blow to Warren. He felt that he only needed one more good push to completely rout the enemy. His only reserve was his old brigade under David Weisiger. Colquitt and Clingman's brigades were virtually useless. Most of the men were used to move prisoners to the Petersburg lines. When Mahone asked Colquitt where the rest of his brigade was, Colquitt responded by pointing to about 150 men and saying, "These are all I have left." Undeterred by the lack of men, Mahone sent Weisiger's brigade south, where they made contact with White's division. The outnumbered rebels pulled back their flanks to better protect themselves. The brigade was bolstered by a few men from Colquitt's brigade, who remained at the front, not taking prisoners to the rear. The deadly crossfire convinced Mahone to pull them back for fear of losing the whole brigade to White's division. During the withdrawal, White's men took numerous prisoners. One rebel, in a stroke of genius, hid his regimental flag in a haversack to prevent its capture. Near nightfall, Humphrey's brigade retook the works lost by Crawford and part of Ayres's men earlier that day. This allowed for part of Crawford's command to extend the Union line to the east, and for Gwynn's brigade to return to its former position guarding the railroad. Heath's division launched 3 light attacks against the entrenched Federals to fill out their position, but discovered the area teeming with enemy troops and withdrew. Despite being unable to drive them away from the railroad, a member of the 12th Virginia wrote, "I feel much better satisfied when our division is engaged because I know it is in good hands and will go farther and do more than any other division." He added, "What our division can't do, can't be done." There's a lot of truth to that statement. So far during the Siege of Petersburg, Mahone's division proved time and again that it was a force to be reckoned with. They drove away the 2nd and 6th Corps to the Jerusalem Plank Road, and they nearly captured an entire division at the Battle of Globe Tavern thus far. Mahone was gaining a great reputation as a versatile and effective commander. As one historian put it, outnumbered by at least 15 brigades to 5 in infantry, and even more disproportionately in artillery, the Confederates had performed one of the war's most amazing feats of arms, despite their failure to attain their objective, knocking the Unionists off the Weldon Railroad. When Warren reported to the Army Commander George Meade about the battle, he mentioned that a large number of his force was taken prisoner, but didn't mention the exact numbers. 3,000 casualties with 2,700 being captured had dealt a significant blow to Warren. However, his lack of reporting this to Meade convinced the Army Commander that he wouldn't need to send additional reinforcements. Warren's men would remain on the battlefield around Globe Tavern, awaiting another Confederate attack or an order from Warren to move out. That night, upon cornstalk beds, the men got such sleep as the care of watching and the dripping rain allowed. During the night, all was still except the groans and cries of the Confederate wounded in the dark forest, who had to wait until daylight before they could be moved.